And here is the Writer's Almanac for Thursday, the 18th of January, 2018. It's the birthday of A.A. Milne, born in London, 1882, who gave us the Winnie the Pooh books. It's the birthday of Dr. Peter Mark Roget, born in London, 1779. He just retired from medical practice, 61 years old, decided to spend his retirement years coming up with a system of classifying words into groups based on their meanings. And that became the thesaurus of English words and phrases. Came out in 1852, Roget's Thesaurus. And it's the birthday of the poet Rubén Darío, born in Matapa, Nicaragua, 1867, one of the great poets in the Spanish language, a household name all over Latin America, barely known in the English-speaking world because his poems are hard to translate into English. Came from a remote village in Nicaragua, which is now called Ciudad Darío, started writing poems at the age of 12. When he was a teenager in Managua, fell in love with a girl named Rosario, determined to marry her. Went off to El Salvador to study with the most famous poet in El Salvador at the time, a man named Francisco Gavidia, who introduced young Darío to the works of contemporary French poets, and he became obsessed with French poetry, learned French well enough to write poems in French, and then he used the rhythms and structure of French poetry to write in Spanish, which is one reason his poems are so difficult to translate into English. He left El Salvador, came back to Nicaragua, traveled around South America, came back to El Salvador, married a woman there. On the day after their wedding, there was a political coup, which had been orchestrated by one of their wedding guests. They fled to Guatemala, then to Costa Rica, had a son. A couple years later, the young wife died. Darío was heartbroken, became an alcoholic, went back to Nicaragua. There he met Rosario, the girl he'd said he would marry, and they reunited, if you know what I mean. And Rosario's brother caught them in the act. He found the poet drunk and in bed with his sister. The brother got out his pistol. He told Darío marriage or death, and the poet chose marriage. There was a priest waiting conveniently nearby. He set off on a series of diplomatic posts overseas, went to New York City, met the Cuban poet José Martí, went to Paris. At this point, he was still only in his mid-20s. He was a war correspondent during the Spanish-American War, lived in Paris, came down with pneumonia, went bankrupt, came back to Nicaragua to be with Rosario, and he died at the age of 49. Here's a poem for today by Patricia Fargnoli, The Guest. In the long July evenings, the French woman who came to stay every summer for 2 weeks at my aunt's inn would row my brother and me out to the middle of the mile-wide lake so that the three of us would be surrounded by the wild extravagance of reds that had transformed both lake and sky into fire. It was the summer after our mother died. I remember the dipping sound of the oars and the sweet music of our voices as she led us in the songs she had taught us to love, Blue Moon, Deep Purple. We sang as she rowed, not ever wondering where she came from or why she was alone, happy that she was willing to row us out into all that beauty. The Guest, a poem by Patricia Fargnoli from her collection Winter, published by Hobblebush Books, and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac, supported by the Poetry Foundation, publisher of Poetry Magazine, the oldest monthly devoted to discovering and publishing new voices in poetry. You can browse 100 years of poetry and become a subscriber at poetryfoundation.org. Produced by Joy Biles, engineered by Noah Smith. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.